I assume that means the stockholder oversight on it.
We can safely assume the CIA was also.
And therefore doesn't assume that you have to be.
So we then assume that since
everybody was successful, I assume.
I mean, you might even assume that they were setting him up, that they
person move in to assume the burdens of leadership.
Automatically assume they're illegal.
Even if we don't assume any behavioral response.
You'd assume that everybody comes to.
That I think most people would just assume that that is for boys.
Students around, I assume, to the various.
Again, assume that you have something to learn.
Which even the majority of the Supreme Court seemed to assume did not.
Familiar, I assume, with the Coney 2012 social media campaign.
And I assume your Appropriations Committee.
And then I assume that my junior senator.
Within the policy world, they assume that women are best served.
It continues to assume there's going to be no increase.
I assume chickens are too. Then you go to the chicken.
By the way, I assume most of you will be familiar with this stuff.
Then can I assume that there's a range of.
I assume they're older than me.
After it was translated into Korean, I assume.
Continue. What we don't want is to assume that this level of homelessness.
Where you just assume that, okay, this
is, and they assume it's just innate.
I lived my life like I had to assume that everything I did.
78 to 80, but before that,
I assume anything that devastating had to be.
You know, I'm gonna assume.
There's this assumption.
But what if that assumption or that prediction is just based?
The assumption is that if
Everyone here today has made an assumption.
The assumption the party should operate.
The assumption is that it's a celebration.
The usual assumption is that because Madison feared legislative